This is a special presentation brought to you by the Daf Map, based on one of the lectures given by HaRav Yehonasan Berger Shlita. Please check out our other videos and shiurim at www.thedafmap.com.
Today's shiur begins at the bottom line of Daf Mem Vov Omid Beis. We are in the middle of a discussion concerning Elisha and the Anshe Yericho, the story that we featured in our previous year involving Elisha's miracle of sweetening the otherwise bitter water supply of Yericho, and thereby for the moment causing a loss of income for those who were supplying the fresh water, the drinkable water. They became very upset, and they started to ridicule the prophet, and he was very displeased, to say the least. And as a result, they ended up dying. And how did they die? They died through miraculous circumstances. The prophet, as he was walking, we saw in our previous year, he looked upon them and he cursed them in the name of God. And we pick up with that, the bottom line, there's a description of what ensued. Vateitzeno shtayim dubim min hayar, two bears emerged from a forest, from the forest. Vativkano mehem arboim ushnei yelodim, and the bears killed 42 of the young people who we are associating with those water providers. Rav Ushmuel, we're at the top of Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Rav Ushmuel Chad Omar Nes v'Chad Omar Nes Besoch Nes. One opinion says there was one absolute miracle, and the other one says there were two miracles that took place. Mand Omar Nes, the opinion that says there was one miracle being the out of the ordinary, the unnatural event. So if you hold like this opinion that says there was one miracle, Yar Have, a forest was there. It was a natural growing forest where the prophet and these detractors were located. Dubim Lo Havu, however, the forest had no bears in it. The miracle was that bears appeared, or bears were created for this purpose of retribution from the offenders. Manda Omar Nes Besoch Nes, according to the opinion that there was a double miracle, Lo Yar Have Velo Dubim Havu. It was an area where there was no forest and there were no bears. The Gemara asks, well, within the context of a miracle, and let me just edit by way of a general statement or editorial statement. I know that we're dealing with the realm of miracles, and yet we find time and time again the effort, we'll say, on the part of the Chazal to see whether they could have managed with less miracle. And the reason for that is, in general, I could say, let's say, Jewish philosophy is such that miracles are not the maximum or the maximal level of behavior. The best in terms of this world is concerned, Olam Hazeh, is things taking place through, we'll say, non-miraculous intervention. This essentially is the will of God. He created nature, the laws of nature, and would prefer that we go through life and even experience our salvation through natural means. And when miracles are needed, so it's some type of extreme circumstance, very pressing circumstance, or there's some type of, we'll say, divine need, for lack of better expression, for the purpose of mankind to see the miracle. But otherwise, the Almighty would prefer doing things within the context of nature, and for man to discover the Almighty through nature. There are, in fact, statements in the Chazal that we find in a few places. One place stands out is Maseches Tainus, that it would actually be better for man not to benefit from that which is brought about miraculously. With that background in mind, we can continue in the Gemara. It asks, "V'leheve dubin v'lo leheve yar." Let there have been bears that appeared without the forest. What was the need for having the forest? The Gemara answers a very interesting answer, and it says, "The be'isi." The bears would have been afraid to attack. And mind you, we're dealing once again within the realm of the miraculous. But even within the realm of the miraculous, as we said before, there's a tendency to try not to depart from nature, at least as much as possible, to cling to the laws of nature. And a part of the laws of nature dictate that bears will not act in an offensive, attacking fashion unless they have a fallback position, namely a forest, a place of refuge, which would give them confidence. And that's what the Gemara is saying here, that the boisi means the bears would have been afraid to attack had they not had the forest background for them. And hence, the creation of the forest was necessary as well. Before we continue in the Gemara, we have a note, a topic heading on the side, which reads, under the Nosay heading, Totzosav, the outcome, Shel Hakrovas Korbonos Al Yedei Bolok. In the Chumash, we find in Sefer Bamidbar, Bolok Melech Moav, the king of the Moabite people, was threatened by the Jewish people traveling through the Midbar, and he sought the services of the infamous Bilam, the prophet of the Gentiles, to curse the Jewish people. And as part of that story, we find Balak offering sacrifices to the Almighty. And again, Balak and Bilam were up to no good. They were up to attack the Jewish people, to defeat the Jewish people, and in the course of their schemes, we find Balak offering sacrifices, hoping to arouse the Almighty for his cause. Omar Rabbi Chanina, Bishvil Arboim Ushnaim Korbonos Shikruv Balak Melech Moav. Because of the 42 sacrifices that this evil king offered, but he offered them heavenwards. He offered them not to idols, but to God. Hivkeu mi Yisrael Arboim Ushnaim Yolodim. There were 42 deaths, losses to the Jewish people in the aforementioned story involving Elisha. 42 Jews died. The Gemara asks a question: is that really the cause and effect with regard to Balak and his sacrifices? Eini ve'omar Rav Yehuda Rav. We do find a Maimer Chazal regarding the outcome of his sacrifices, but not the 42 young people that were killed. There's another outcome that we find, and Rav Yehuda Rav tells us that a person should pursue the study of Torah and performance of mitzvahs Lishma, even if his motivations are not totally pure. Through one studying Torah and performing mitzvahs, even if his purpose is to accrue honor and pride, and not for the pure sake of heavenly fulfillment of commands. Nevertheless, we say shemitoch shelo lishma bo lishma. Through the non-pure motive, you will come eventually to fulfillment for pure motives. And what's the precedent for that? What's the basis for such an approach? As a reward for the 42 sacrifices that the Balak, the king of Moab, offered, and his offering certainly was not with pure motivation. Nevertheless, Zocha v'yatzasa mimenu Rus, there came forth from him the great historical figure, Rus, the great-grandmother of David. She, of course, had merits on her own right, in her own rights. And she Yotzimenu Shlomo, there came forth from Rus, the great-grandmother of King Solomon, Shekosuf Bey, regarding King Shlomo HaMelech, it says, Elef Oilos Ya'ale Shlomo, many sacrifices, 1,000 sacrifices the king would offer up. V'yomar Reb Yossi ben Choni, Rus, Bitoi shel Egloin, Benoi shel Bolak Hoisa. As far as genealogy is concerned, Rus was the daughter of Eglon, a Moabite king, who himself was a descendant from Bolak. So, what's the point of this long question? The point is that the outcome of the sacrifices that Bolak offered was the birth of Rus, who was a descendant from the Moabite people, tracing her ancestry back to Bolak, and not the 42 young people that were killed. The Gemara answers, there's no question here per se. Tavoso miha leklola have. Bolak's intention, his tavoso means his desire, was for cursing purposes, and that too came to fulfillment many years later in the time of Elisha. Vayomru anshe oir el Elisha hinei no Moshe po'ir toiv kasher Adoni ro'eh. The people of Yericho said to Elisha, "Behold, our community is very pleasant, as you can see." The Gemara asks, how can they describe their community as a pleasant place to live? The Pasuk describes that region, that area of having a bad water supply, and Eretz Mishakeles is a place in which people die, and they're praising it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Chein Mokom Al Yoshvav. Rabbi Yochanan reveals a human truth, and that is that the grace of a place is upon its inhabitants. No matter, without citing any specific well-known global metropolises, especially those in which there's a significant Jewish population, nevertheless, some of those places are, to the outsider, would be considered highly undesirable to live in. Whether it's pollution, whether it's traffic jams that can result in people's transit time from work to an hour and a half in one direction every single day. And yet, when you speak to those people, they'll say, "Oh, our town, our city is the greatest place on earth." How can that be? Here it is. Chein mokom al yoshev. Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Shloisha chenos hein. There are 3 examples of grace whereby the one who perceives it finds beauty and desirability, whereas others, outsiders, wouldn't necessarily agree. And what are these 3 graces? Chein mokom al yoshvav, the place that people dwell in, for them is considered desirable. Chein isha al baila, and here Rashi says, Chein ha'isha tomid al baila. A husband will, of course, assuming some positive circumstances, a husband will always appreciate his wife, will always find her very desirable, even if she is objectively ugly. Her husband finds her attractive. And number 3, Chein mekach al mekcho. A person purchases an article, the purchaser appreciates it, even though to outsiders they might think, what an odd item to have purchased. Oftentimes you can use examples in the realm of furniture. A person has a particular, let's say, a sofa that he puts in his living room, and it's just totally incongruous with the other furnishings and the decor of his domicile, and yet he purchased it, put it there. Must be that he likes it. People walking in will raise an eyebrow. So be it. Chein mekach al mekcho. The Gemara continues, Tonu Rabbanan, Shlosha Chaloyin Chola Elisha. There are three sicknesses or ailments that Elisha experienced. Echad Shegira Dubin Betinokos. One ailment was a type of punishment for his having acted in such a harsh fashion against those youth that were taunting him. It's true, they had it coming to them, but maybe he went a little bit too far. Rashi says, Echad Shigira Dubin, the Shigiram is to incite the bears to attack those young people. And Rashi says, Ba'avon Shigira Dubin, it was viewed as a sin. It was, as I say, it was too harsh on his part. And what else? Another ailment, V'echad Shedochva L'Gechazi B'shtei Yodayim. He also suffered a sickness because of his overbearing approach to his servant, Gehazi. Gehazi was not a positive character, and we're going to see as we go on in the Gemara a little more about him. But nevertheless, he pushed him away. He didn't accept him after reprimanding Gehazi. We find he reprimanded him in a very harsh fashion. And the analogy used by the Gemara is he pushed him away with two hands. If you want to reprimand someone, and we'll see this too as described later in the Gemara, you reprimand him in a moderated fashion, and that would be by pushing him away with one hand, continuing the analogy, but two hands is too harsh, and Elisha was punished for that. V'echad, and there was a final ailment, shemeis bo, that he eventually died from. Shenemar, and the reference to three ailments is seen in this pasuk. Ve'elisha chala es cholyoi asher yamus bo, and Rashi describes chala. The word chala accounts for one, and es cholyo accounts for two, and asher yomuspo accounts for the third ailment. We continue in the Gemara. Tonu Rabbanan. On the side we have a topic heading. You'll notice the Nosay / Mivneh heading. Le'olam yehei smoil doiche yamin mekarev. It should always be that if you need to reprimand, to castigate, so do so with your left hand. The left hand being, for the majority of the population, is the weaker hand. So when you want to castigate, when you push away, you do so in a weaker fashion. And when you want to draw someone near, you want to endear someone to yourself, do so with a greater strength, and let the right hand be that which draws near. The double underline marking that you will see as you scan down the Gemara highlights three, we'll say, examples of individuals who did not follow this dictum. And we highlight the lo kamo, number one. The first double underline involves Elisha. There's Elisha and Gehazi. Number two, it involves Yehoshua ben Prachya and his student. And I should say, just let me correct myself, there were two examples, not three, that we will feature in the Gemara. And those are the two double underlines that you see in the next number of lines. So now we look in the Gemara. Tonu Rabbanan li'olam tehei smoil doiche v'yamin mekareves. One should always behave in such a way that the left pushes away and the right draws near. Loi ke'elisha shedachvoi l'gechazi b'shtei yodav. Not like Elisha and his behavior with regard to Gehazi, who pushed him away with two hands. V'lo Yehoshua ben Prachya shedochvoi li'echad mi talmidov b'shtei yodav. Nor like the behavior of Yehoshua ben Prachya with regard to one of his students that he pushed away with two hands. We have a note on the side to look into a work called Chesronos Hashas. Chesronos Hashas is a work in which censored portions of the Talmud were, were accounted for, and in other words, that which had been censored out is recorded in this work called Chesronos Hashas. and in some Gemara editions, some contemporary editions of the Shas, you even find them printed into the text, sometimes in a different font, but whatever the case is, it's readily accessible. So in that particular work called Chesronos, meaning that which is missing from the Shas, there is a reading here that, as it says, Lo Yoshua ben Prachia shedachvoi leha-noitzri. And the Noitzri is a reference to the founder of, or the one who is identified as the founder of Christianity. We're not going to get into this rather in-depth discussion concerning chronology, but it's interesting to note, at least, and I know that it's the subject of a great deal of research and scholarly work concerning the issue of dating. Just to put things in a certain historical perspective, if you make this assumption that the founder of Christianity was in fact a student of Yehoshua ben Prachia, bear in mind Yehoshua ben Prachia lived several generations before even Hillel and Shammai. And we know about Hillel. Hillel lived at a point in time that was approximately 100 years before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Some associate Hillel with the date of 30 before the Common Era. And then you roll back several generations before, and you get to the date for Yoshua ben Prachia. And that's about all we're going to say on this topic. Something that, for those of you who want to research it further, so here you have an interesting starting point. The Noitzri. The Noitzri, some will say the Nazarene, and I'm sure most of the listeners know to whom we are referring. We'll get back to that story in a number of lines where you can see our double underlined highlight of Yoshua ben Prachia appears. In the meantime, Elisha Mahi. What's this story involving Elisha? Dichtiv. So the Gemara, as we've said many times in Gemara markings, Daf Yomi Shurim, is presupposing a certain level of familiarity with the storyline of the Tanakh. So a bit of brief background here. There was a military official from one of the surrounding nations. His name was Naaman. He was a Sar Tzava. He was a military general of that particular nation, and he suffered from tsaras. And just to make the long story short, he was healed from his tsaras through the advice that Elisha, the Jewish prophet, gave, and that involved his immersing in the Jordan River, and miraculously that helped Naaman, and Naaman felt a sense of gratitude and offered the prophet presents involving 8 different items, and the prophet refused to accept any remuneration for his advice, and there was this we call him the Elisha's servant. He was a person of let's say of desire, of maybe lust, and he said, "Oh, what a shame! All this wealth that my master could have achieved, and he's letting it all go." And he, Gehazi by name, after Naaman departed on his way, Gehazi caught up with him and said to the general Naaman, "Oh, you owe us something." And in the storyline, he requested 2 of the 8 gifts that had been offered to Elisha. Of course, for as far as Elisha is concerned, that was a disaster. Here was a chance to sanctify the name of the Almighty. Here, a prophet of God Almighty helped this Gentile individual general, and did so certainly out of the norm, and accepted no remuneration. And here his Elisha's servant is coming and ruining everything by insisting on some payment. The Gemara. Dichtiv Vayomer Naaman Hoel Kach Kikarim. The military general that was healed offered payment. Uksiv Vayomer Elov. We should simply mention that this pasuk Chav Gimel, where Vayomer Naaman Hoel Kach Kikarim, was Naaman addressing Gehazi, as we mentioned earlier. Gehazi requesting some payment, so Naaman offers him take these loaves, and in the pasuk you see also chalifos, clothing, suits were also offered. That's pasuk Chav Gimel. As you go on in the storyline, Gehazi eventually comes back to Elisha, and Elisha asks him, where were you? And Gehazi says, I didn't go anywhere. And Elisha says as follows, Uksiv, Vayomer Elav, Lo libi halach, kasher hafach ish me'al merkavto likroscha. Did my heart not go with you? In other words, we're dealing here with a prophet who doesn't have to be physically present, and he knew very well that Gehazi had gone to Naaman, stopped him on his trip, and Gehazi took things from him. Ha'es lokachas es hakesef v'lokachta begodim v'zeisim ukromim v'tzoyin uboker v'avodim u'shvachas. And you took from him 8 things. The Gemara asks, why is the prophet charging Gehazi with having taken 8 gifts? Umi shakli kulehai kesefu begodim hu deshakil. When you look at the pasuk, as we mentioned a moment ago, in pasuk of Gimel, you see that he didn't take 8 things. He took 2 things. He took the kikarim, the baked goods, and suits of clothing. Omar Rabbi Yitzchak, ba'oisu shah hoya Elisha oisek b'shmoyne shrotzim. When this event had taken place, Gehazi and Elisha had been studying the chapter in Maseches Shabbos called Shmoyne Shrotzim. What's significant for us is that the name of the chapter in Maseches Shabbos is called the 8 Shrotzim. Omar lo Rasha, so that is, Elisha says to Gehazi, you wicked man, Higia eis litoil schar shmoyne shrotzim. Now is your time for getting the reward of your having studied that perek. V'tzoras Naaman tidbak b'cha uv'zaracha li'olam. And the affliction that Naaman suffered from the tzoras will cling unto you and your descendants forever. So that when the prophet was saying you took 8 things, he didn't mean you took literally 8 items. Rather, the items that you took, okay, you took those things, keep them, so to speak, as your reward for having studied the perek called Shmoyne Shrotzim, the 8 Shrotzim. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. That's your reward. Enjoy it. But you're going to suffer for having, say, foiled my plan in establishing a Kiddush Hashem, and you will now suffer with tzaras, you and your descendants. A pasuk that makes reference to 4 Mitzrayim that you find in Sefer Melachim, Melachim Beis Perek Zayin. It says, V'arba anoshim hoyu Mitzrayim, Amar Rav Yehonasan Ze Gehazi u'shloishes bonov. Without getting into the whole story behind those 4 Mitzrayim, all we need to say at this point is that curse did come to fruition. Gehazi and his 3 sons were all Mitzrayim. Vayelech Elisha Damesek Loma Holach. The pasuk says that Elisha went to Damesek. What did he go there for? Damesek is a city. Maybe it's associated with Damascus, but it's a city outside of Israel. And it says that Elisha went there. What did he go there for? He went to retrieve, to have Gehazi come back in repentance, but he didn't do so. Omar lo chazor b'cha. Elisha pleaded with Gehazi, return, repent. Omar lo kach mekublani mimcha. Gehazi said, thusly I had received from you. Call me shechota vehichti es harabim. Anyone who not only sinned but caused others to sin, ein maspikin biyodo lasos tshuva. He's not afforded the opportunity to repent. My Ovad, what did he do that the Gemara says he's guilty of machti es harabim, that he caused others to sin? So you'll see a list of possibilities, and the triangles highlight that. On the side under the Mivneh heading, the triangle appears. These are Gimel, Deos, Bema, Gehazi, Hichti, es harabim. In what way did Gehazi cause the public to sin? So we continue now in the Gemara. Iko Diamri, some say, Even she'eves tola loy lechatos Yeravam ve'amido bein shamayim la'aretz. Again, Tanakh background would be very helpful. So we'll just briefly say, many years earlier there was a king called Yeravam. In English I think he's referred to as Jeroboam. He was a contemporary of the son of Shlomo HaMelech. Again, just as for purposes of historical perspective, it's many generations, several generations earlier. This king Yeravam was threatened, so to speak, by Rechavam, and he caused the split in the Jewish nation. Yeravam, heading the northern part of Israel, comprised of 10 tribes. The southern region of Israel, the 2 tribes, Yehuda and Binyamin, remained under the leadership of the descendants of Beis David, of the Davidic dynasty. During this time, when Yeravam ascended to power, he didn't want the masses of Jews to practice the thrice annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem, so he set up golden calves, ironically, one at the southern extent of his kingdom, and one in the northern part of his kingdom. The Gemara makes reference to those golden calves, which Yeravam suggested as an alternative place of worship to the Beis Hamikdash. Those calves are referred to by the word chatos, the sinful, we'll say the sinful calves. They were metallic, they were gold, and what Gehazi did is he set up some type of a magnetic apparatus that's referred to as Even Shoeves, literally a drawing stone. But Rashi describes it as something that would appear to be a magnet that was capable of lifting these golden calves into the air. That created some type of, we'll say, imagery in the eyes of the masses. Maybe they didn't know how the calves were suspended. I don't know exactly what was in the minds of the masses when they saw this, but what they did see were these floating golden calves, and that would certainly increase their significance in the eyes of the masses, and hence Gehazi, for having done this, is called a machti es harabim, causing massive sinning. The Ika Diamri, another version, is Shem Chokak Lo Apuma. Again, with reference to the golden calves of Yeravam, not a magnet, but rather he knew the ineffable name of God, and he etched that out on the mouth of these golden calves. And the calf would say the first 2 commandments of the 10 commandments: Anochi, reference to Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and V'lo yeh lecha Elohim achirim, and you shall not have other god forms. So this golden calf then in effect was saying, I am your God, and naturally that would be a major example of machti es harabim. A third version is a practice of Gehazi where he did not allow the rabbis of the time, Rashi refers to the students of Elisha. Well, if we can make the assumption that Elisha was the Godol Hador, he was the major Torah luminary of his generation, so all the rest of the population would be considered his students, and this Gehazi limited the access of the Rabbanon to Elisha. Naturally, if Rabbanan had legal questions, halachic questions that needed resolution, they would have turned to Elisha, but he limited their access to him. How do we know that? Dichtiv. We know because it says in the scripture, it says in the pasuk after Gehazi was removed from the scene, it says, "Vayomru b'nei hanavim el Elisha." The student prophets, we'll say the scholars, they said to Elisha, "Hinei no hamokim asher anachnu yoshvim sham lefonecha tsar mimenu." They complained that there isn't enough room for all of us. So what can we infer? Michlal, it would then seem to be that the Ado Idna, until now, when Gehazi was still around, lo havedochik, it wasn't tight. In other words, there was enough room. Why? Because Gehazi was keeping the people away from Elisha. Once the Gehazi barrier was removed, so naturally many were now able to come in, and their reaction was that there isn't enough room for us, for all of us over here. Yehoshua ben Prachya Maihi. What is the incident involving Yehoshua ben Prachya and the student? We already mentioned who that student was, according to the Chesronos Hashas. Again, here's historical perspective. There's a reference here to Yanai Hamelech. When this king, he was a king from the we'll say the Hasmonean dynasty, who was very unfavorable, to put it mildly, to the rabbis, and he is responsible for the murder of many rabbinical figures of his time. So when that was happening, Shimon ben Shetach, another luminary of that period, Tinhu Achte, his sister, who happened to be the queen, she hid Shimon ben Shetach, which was her brother. So he escaped death through the good offices of his sister. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Prachya, he didn't have that luxury. Ozal Orak Alexandria Shel Mitzrayim. He escaped to Alexandria in Mitzrayim. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Prachya saved his life by running away. Ki havishalma, when peace came, when the coast was clear, Sholach le Shimon ben Shetach. Shimon ben Shetach sent a message to Alexandria. Mini Yushalayim Ira Kodesh Loch Alexandria Shel Mitzrayim. And it's a type of we'll say coded message. He says, from Jerusalem, the holy city, to Alexandria of Mitzrayim, Achosi Bali Shorui B'Sochech Vani Yosheves Shomeima. My sister, my husband is dwelling in you, meaning in Alexandria, and I am dwelling in desolateness. So what Shimon ben Shetach is saying, he's saying, that he who is in Alexandria needs to come back here to Yerushalayim. Omar, so Yehoshua ben Prachya, receiving this message, said, Shma mino, have le shama. It's a sign that things are peaceful. So he started on his journey back to Yerushalayim. Ki also, on his way, iklo lahu ushpiza. He arrived at an inn. Kom kamayu biyakro shapir. The innkeeper, the woman was the innkeeper. As far as the storyline is concerned, it's a married woman that served Yehoshua ben Prachya and his entourage. Biyakro shapir, in Yakra is honor, covet. In Shapir means a lot of, or a good amount of proper respect. Avdi le yakro tuva. And she served them with great respect. Yosef v'ko mishtabach. He was sitting there and he was praising Kama Noah Achsanya Zu. Now he said how Noah. Here we run into a translation problem, or the double entendre of what Noah can mean. So Yehoshua ben Rach was saying Kama Noah. Noah is a word referring to pleasantness. It can also mean beautiful. So he was saying, he used the word Noah. So how Noah is this hostess? Omar le echad mitalmidov. And echad, we've dashed underline, that's a reference to, according to the Chesronos Hashas, this is a reference to the founder of Christianity, the Nosay, the Nazarene. So he was a student, part of this entourage, said, Rebbe, Eineha trutos, her eyes are very round, they're ugly. In other words, trutos literally means they're spherical, they're round, as opposed to the eye's normal look would be, we'll say, almond shaped. So after hearing his Rebbe Shimon Prach is saying Kama Noah Sanyazu, his reaction was, how can you describe her as Noah, which that in his mind, in the Talmud's mind, how can you describe her as physically beautiful when she is ugly? Oh my lay! So the Rebbe says, Rabbi Shimon Rachi says, Rasha, you wicked one, bekachato isek. That's what you're involved with. That's what your mind is on physical beauty and gazing upon women and what have you. I said she serves us what I said, she's Noah, means she's serving us very pleasantly, and your mind is preoccupied with physicality and a very undesirable behavior on the part of people. Certainly the Torah trains us to let's say, have pure thoughts and not be preoccupied with this kind of thinking. And you see that's what was on this student's mind. Apik arba mea shipuri v'shamte. There was this term you find elsewhere in the Shas. It's a reference to putting someone into excommunication. The word shamte is excommunication, and the translation of this phrase is he took out, or he blew forth 400 shofars. The blowing of the shofar was a means of announcing, we'll say, excommunication. And for our purposes, the Rebbe censured this student. Kol yuma also lekame velo kible. Day after day, the student sought to return. He wanted to be accepted back into the fold. Yuma chad hava kori kriyashma. On one day, this happened again, where the student approached Rabbi Yeshua Prachya, and Rabbi Yeshua, was in the middle of reciting the Kriya Shema. During Kriya Shema, one is not allowed to engage in conversation. So while he was saying Kriya Shema, Osala Kameh, the student came again, like he's been doing in the past. And Rabbi Shimon Prachya, just on that moment, he said, now is the time to take him back. So he made some kind of hand motion. The hand motion, his intention was to basically say, wait a moment. I am interested in taking you back. However, it's a hand motion. It can also be understood in the opposite way. Savar midchedochile, and the student thought that he was being pushed away once again. That was called the last straw. And Ozal Zokaf Leventa Palcha. He went ahead. He went and he erected a brick and started to worship the brick. The concept of a brick being used in worship, you actually find more on this in if I'm not mistaken, in Maseches Avodah Zarah. There's a discussion about that. For our purposes, though, it represents we'll say, as we said, the final straw, whereby this student rebels and becomes an apostate. So Rabbi Shimon ben Prachya says, come back. Amalei kach mekublani mimcha. Kol achoite umachti es harabim ein maspikin biyodoi la'asos tshuva. I have, just like we saw earlier, that anyone who sins and causes others to sin is not accepted back in repentance. Diomamor, and here we have a statement of what he was involved with. And again, if you look in the Chesronis Hashas, it says here Yeshu. Yeshu is an abbreviation of Yamach Shemoy V'Zichro, a reference once again to the founder of Christianity. And what did he do? Kishef, he was involved with Kishuf. Kishuf is black magic. Black magic is is a reality. It's and you may have heard stories of what that founder of Christianity was capable of doing. Things that would appear, let's say, in the supernatural. Very fine. You see here in the Talmud itself a reference to that. But it's not because of divine powers. It's because he had the knowledge of how to arouse the powers of the occult, of black magic. Vehesis, vehediach. Mesis and mediach are terms that are used to describe those who cause others to rebel and become apostates. Vehechti es Yisrael, caused the masses to sin. And that's quite an apt description of that individual. Again, the issue of chronology, history, and all that entails is something that one might want to research further. But from our perspective, assuming, of course, that which the censor took out and ought to be returned, you can see what is being described. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Yetzer Tinok v'Isha. When it comes to the Yetzer is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. Tinok, children. Isha, women, wives of individuals. When one needs to, we'll say, suppress, when one needs to reprimand, when one needs to chastise, te smol doche v'yamin mikareves, do so, but in a moderated fashion. As we've said a few times today already, let the left push away, the weaker hand push away, and when it comes to drawing near and endearment, let the right draw near. Yetzer, the evil inclination, that is more specifically, it's a reference to the desire, man's desire for intimacy with women. So intimacy with women in an unbridled fashion is, of course, quite forbidden. Intimacy is allowed in the context of marriage. Now, if a person, let us say, tries to suppress his yetzer, it's quite possible that a person can do so in such a strong fashion that he will, as they say, it's like, as I might call it, mind over matter, or psychologically speaking, can impose upon himself a total disdain for intimacy, a sense of repulsion from it. What have we gained with that? There will be no procreation. The first and one of the major mitzvahs of the Torah is to engage in procreation. So that here the advice is that yes, it's true, one must suppress his desire for intimacy, but not totally. And that's what we mean by let the smol be doiche. Leave a little room for desire, for at least that will be manifest with, you'll be able to actualize that with one's own wife. Tinok, a child, the youth, and the youth, time immemorial, have been very sensitive. And if you chastise a youth too intensely, the fear is he'll run away and rebel, and certainly as this recording is being made, the stories abound with regard to that problem, and you can see it's not something that's unique to this particular time in history, but it goes back all the way back. Isha, likewise with a woman, with one's wife, if a person suppresses her, pushes her away, chastises her too intensely, she might walk out, so to speak, while still married, and find herself with other men. And Rashi says Teitze l'tar b'sro, and can actually rebel and throw away all that which is dear and holy to us.